Elevator systems. Bowen family systems theory in brief for a life of learning. Welcome to Elevator Systems, the podcast that looks at Bowen family systems theory in brief and understandable ways. Today, we are continuing the hot topic of sex, and Kent Webb is along for a ride in the elevator to talk about sexual diversity. Thank you so much for being here, Kent.
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Kent works in both the organizational and mental health worlds with practices in each field. He's an executive coach and licensed clinical social worker who has obtained broad experience in education as both a chief executive officer and a mental health coach. After receiving an undergraduate degree in music therapy and a master's degree in social work, Kent trained in the postgraduate program at the Bowen Center and became faculty there in 2020. His publications include a chapter in Chronic Death and Illness in the Family, 2 articles in the Family Systems Forum about sexual diversity, and a chapter in the book The Emotional Side of Organizations, Applications of Bowen Theory. So, Kent, you get to lead us off with your thinking on Bowen theory in the conversation about sexual diversity.
Well, I think in terms of Bowen theory, the topic of sexual diversity is a relatively new one, and how theory has thought about sexual diversity really hasn't been addressed really since I began to address it, in the last 10, 15 years, which was all predicated on my own personal experience of being in the postgraduate program. I was married, had 2 children, functioning as a heterosexual man in the world, which all of it was very important to me, and began to realize that my identity really was as a gay man, that it had been a lifetime of denial, minimization, suppression, for family reasons, the part of the country that I lived in, the socio-historic times that I grew up in. Often people think that as you're working on differentiation in the past, that one wouldn't come to a same-sex orientation. That was the thinking at the time, that same-sex orientation was more related to undifferentiation and perhaps closely related to a pathology. And that if a person was really working towards differentiation, that wouldn't be the result. But the more I was working on self and differentiation, that became the result. And I thought, well, what's up with that? And so from a theory perspective, I said, well, maybe Bowen theory's position about same-sex and sexual diversity orientations isn't accurate. And how would I know if it is or it isn't? And true to theory, that directed me to the sciences. And I began in 2022 my research related to sexual diversity, biology, its relationship to its presence and expression in other species in the animal world. And lo and behold, it opened up a whole new world to me. And, there were 450 species from gutworms to humans that same-sex orientations and gender variations exist in the animal world. So I thought this idea that it's just related to differentiation in the human can't be accurate. And so, my practice is primarily with gay men. And I thought, I'm in a perfect environment to study how does this happen? And what are the challenges that gay men experience? So my population is primarily focused on, gay men and same-sex related to male-to-male engagement. So that's how I started. So my contributions in the area of sexual diversity were all personally driven. I am not a science guy. And so delving into the genetics and the epigenetics and the neurohormonal processes in the brain and maturation processes, those were a workout for me. And the evolutionary components. And through my studies in evolution, I was luckily turned on to Joan Refgarden's work, Sexual Diversity. And
oh, there it is.
yeah, there it is, Evolution's Rainbow. Victoria Harrison actually was the one who suggested that book to me way back in the early 2000s. So I was forever thankful to Victoria for informing me of that publication. So, I invited Joan Refgarden to the April 2025 spring conference as the featured guest scientist speaker. So it's been a long journey of studying evolution, biology, genetics, and looking then at how does Bowen theory fit into, I say, the management of same-sex existence and diversity in the family and in society. I think it has a lot to offer in a different way than it originally did in terms of its explanation of its presence.
I'm really excited about you being here and all the thinking you've done about this. I have some questions that I'm going to follow up with later.
All right. Good.
Do you want to say more, or do you want me to go and give a little thinking of a pitch that I came up with?
I think I probably said enough for right now.
Okay, so when I was thinking about this episode, I knew I was going to be sitting with you, Ken, who's done so much more thinking about this. So what I was reflecting for my pitch of this is really the topic that we brought to this whole season, which is what gets people stirred up in the dinner table that people aren't able to talk about sexual diversity or get real reactive. And so it got me thinking about curiosity, which I think is a really important idea in Bowen theory. It's not one of the main concepts, but I did a nerd out deep dive if we want to talk about curiosity and Bowen theory, because I went a little research crazy. But my pitch is short, which is I believe it is useful when thinking about sexual diversity to observe when I and others can stay in a curious space with this topic and when you leave curiosity. And so what information could this provide you and I about ourselves and our system when curiosity is lost, when we've lost that ability to think about that? So that's my pitch I'm bringing.
That's what I was trying to say before, was my curiosity about how did I end up being a gay man when that wasn't my intention. And not get judgmental about it. As I had in the growing up. So remaining curious, I think, is part of being more neutral. And gaining information and being more objective, rather than operating out of beliefs or values that are driven by culture or religion. That's when we stop being curious, is when we get fused with a belief system.
Yeah. And one of the deep dives I found is even that curiosity linked to the ability to even see the connection to the natural world. Like that is one of the things that was talked about in the literature, which I thought was so useful, thinking about the efforts that you made. Yeah.
And I'm still curious. There are parts of sexual diversity that I'm still curious about. But Dixie, I think you have some things you want to ask.
Well, my pitch is, interestingly enough, 3 words of what I think Bowen theory adds to this conversation is curiosity about variation. I think that's the shortest pitch I've ever come up with. So curiosity about variation, and then I would add maybe and observing the function or role of diversity in groups. So I have a pitch from a non-Bowen writer, the scientist primatologist Frans de Waal, whose work I think fits really nicely in the theory. So he wrote the book Different Gender Through the Eyes of a Primatologist. So I have a quote from him. Sex has a wider social function. Number 1. And then he also writes, in bonobos, sexual behavior occurs in virtually every partner combination, male, female, male, male, female, female, adult, juvenile. It is used for appeasement, affection, reconciliation, excitement, sharing, reward, anxiety reduction, and social bonding. Human sexuality is similarly multifaceted. And then for just a couple other pitches, I actually went to the Bowen Center's Spring Symposium in 2025, Sexual Diversity in the Human Family, and I just pulled some quotes from some of the abstracts. The conference is available to purchase, so I will link it, and Dr. Joan Roughgarden was the keynote. So people can go there and hear the conference. But Dr. Carrie Collier said, the presence of sexual diversity and gender differences have the propensity to stir up emotional intensity in the family system. This can ignite emotional distance and cut off patterns. And then Dr. Anne McKnight, who is going to be a guest in an upcoming episode here, she wrote, sexual diversity has persisted in the human family over time, as individuals, whether reproducing or not, have contributed to the survival and productivity of the social unit. It is useful to identify how individuals with sexual diversity have been present and contributed to the viability and survival of the human family. So there's just some more thoughts. What stands out in all of that?
Well, I think similarly to Frans de Waal's quote that you made available. That's a great book. It talks about different and sexual variation with men and women and folks who identify as non-binary, transgender, and he puts it in not only into the animal world but also into the human existence and life, which I think oftentimes evolution, biologists are hesitant to do that, but he made the leap between the animal world and humans, and I'm glad that he did. Also, Dr. Collier's and Dr. McKnight's statements, are supporting the direction that myself and others are wanting to move theory toward. Sexual diversity and gender binary differences are normal. They're natural. They occur. They're not the result of cause and effect. They're part of the natural system. They serve a function, or otherwise they wouldn't have existed in all these species since the beginning of time to the present. No matter what people, society, or emotional process pressures are at bay, sexual variation just continues to exist. And as Anne McKnight used the word persist, it serves a function. And I think Dr. Roughgarden put it in the context of social selection theory, which is a part of all the words that you reported that that Frans de Waal used to identify the functions of sexual diversity. That all would fit in the umbrella of social selection theory, which is very different than, Darwin's reference to sexual selection theory, which didn't really create a function for same sexual diversity. In fact, the evolutionists of the time kind of referred to it, as the Bible did, as a mistake of nature. And that's all the further they went with it. So it didn't serve a function. Some people toward the end, the neo-Darwinists were looking at kin selection, which de Waal mentions, as does Roughgarden and others, that it does serve a kin selection function. But the sexual selection theorists, that was their effort to take it out of the mistake of nature bucket.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ken. And I think I really appreciate your efforts, because I do believe the way you're thinking about this aligns more with the ideas of the theory, which is variation exists across the human family and across individuals, and how, to represent and almost keep the theory more open in some ways to, I guess, not get caught in the thinking of the maybe society or culture as driving that. I mean, I know that's the criticism that Darwin would have had as well, right? That he had some of these ideas, but was influenced by the culture. I don't know if that's the right word, or the thinking of the time.
Yeah. Well, I think everyone is aware of and can talk about Dr. Bowen's statements. I think he made in the epilogue chapter of Family Evaluation in terms of giving theory to the world, that it's a
Yeah.
theory that needs to be tested and proven. If it needs to be modified or corrected or extended, he welcomed the efforts to do so, as long as they were rooted in science and evidence. When I worked with Mike Kerr over all these years and was doing my research and would bring questions to him, or taking positions or having hypotheses about various things, he would always ask the question, well, where's the evidence for that? And so I think Bowen theory is an open theory and has room for expansion, modification, and correction if or when it needs it.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that. I don't know if you had an example that you wanted to bring, Kent, or I had other questions that I was maybe going to ask you.
Oh, I like questions.
Okay. I was thinking about, how do you hold on to your own thinking as someone who's really challenging an idea in a theory, or even an idea in society? How do you hold on to your own thinking? How is Bowen theory a resource to you in that, in holding on to your own thinking in the face of others who might think quite differently?
Yeah. Well, it's been a workout, and I thought when I began, I'm taking on Dr. Bowen and Dr. Kerr, so if I can hang in there with Dr. Kerr and working with him as closely as I did, and Dr. Bowen wasn't alive at that point when I began this. When I worked with him, I was not talking with him about this. I was a married straight guy with 2 little kids. But theory has been really useful to me, Katie, in terms of differentiation of self and the construct within differentiation of self, solid self and pseudo self. And that they're not up for negotiation when solid self is built upon facts, evidence, science. And I began to form my solid self in relationship to being a gay man, and also how I was beginning to understand how that developed in me, both from a biological perspective, evolutionary perspective, and a family and societal perspective. I just knew I couldn't go back. And this is who I am. It is my identity. My functioning has been better than ever before because I'm not holding all of that tension and anxiety and dissonance within myself. I'm able to think as compared to just protect. So differentiation of self, I think, has been the major contributor of Bowen theory, and then the other related concepts, as well as the side-by-side panel of anxiety and stress and fear, the interrelationship between the two, knowing that I would have to manage both in order to stay the course and stick with my beliefs and my position.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I like your addition of mentioning fear. I was just thinking different clinical families I have, because I don't have the personal journey. I have my own journey as a heterosexual white female, which means that I don't have to define myself sometimes in a lot of different places. But I've always been so interested in sitting with families and just walking that journey of giving people space to hear each other's thinking, and just the variation and the capacity for different systems to handle that. And I think the naming fear, I have just watched families just really shut down in their thinking as they fear for their child or their loved ones or themselves. And I just think that's useful. I don't know if that sparks any thinking for you.
What I am aware of, and I think if you talked with any sexually diverse or non-binary person, they would most likely tell you that fear and anxiety and worry about being harmed, being rejected, not being approved of, being kicked out, being extruded was primary in the length of time that it takes for most people to come out once that they are aware of this difference within themselves. The awareness of difference can live within people for a number of years before they begin to identify, well, how am I going to relate to this difference and what does it mean for me? But I think fear is worry, anxiety, all of the pseudo self stuff is right. A huge contributor to the experience of many sexually diverse and non-binary people.
Yeah, I think that goes along with I don't really have a specific example other than spending, I don't know, my entire life in the church, and in recent decades, I would say, just noticing the changes in perspective that individuals or people have when they have a family member who comes out, and how it often takes it being a family member for a shift in perspective. And I was also thinking that there is also variation in the response of people in the Christian faith, and I have to do my best to stay curious and not assume someone is gonna land in a particular way. But sometimes there is that doubling down on tradition and maybe cutoff, and sometimes there is inclusion. I've really appreciated the work and research of Joe Berger. I've heard him present quite a few times now, actually, and he talks about how anxiety can be present both in rejection and like full-on acceptance, like that there can be, just like in all things, there can be anxiety on both sides. So yeah, I've just been thinking about just remembering leaving space for people to have different reactions, and also seeing, like you say, the fear, the ripple effects of what does that mean about how do I fit in this, say, in this church community or with my family or different relationships.
Yeah, we live in a number of different systems, right, or subsystems.
Yeah.
And we can experience different degrees of reactivity from one system to another. So a family might be very accepting, but a church community may not, or a political party may not, or the work system may not. So it's always something to manage, usually.
What I was thinking for your comment too, Dixie, is that I think theory is useful to me when I can get judgmental of how other people are responding, because I think if I can hold on to thinking that a system can dictate the reactivity in other, and anxiety can look like shutting down, being really rigid in your thinking, not having the capacity for curiosity, I think that on a good day can help me kind of think through where I can get quite critical of others.
Yeah. Well, I think, I'm bringing it back to theory a bit in terms of being curious and not getting stuck in dogma or dichotomies about good, bad, right, wrong. Is Dr. Bowen's identification of, if one decides to take the project on of, establishing open relationships with, family members, with others, in which, the primary criteria of an open, viable connection is the exchange of information, the exchange of ideas, the exchange of who one is, the exchange of what one's doing, without judgment, criticism, or being told what to do. And if that connection can withstand tension, pressure, conflict, and not get done in by it, then that's a successful open relationship. And I think about than sexual diversity as, sitting around the dinner table and somebody wants to talk about their new boyfriend and the guy who's talking is a guy, so he's talking about a male in this context, that in an open system, that could get managed pretty well.
Yeah.
But we all know that there aren't the degrees of open relationships that promote that kind of exchange around many dinner tables.
Yeah.
At least in the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, that might lead me into one of my other questions. I was listening to one of my favorite other podcasts this week, A Good Hang with Amy Poehler, and she was talking to Paula Pell, I think her name is. And she was talking about how, she was a lesbian, but grew up, there was just nothing anywhere. There was no other lesbian who was out in her school growing up. And I was thinking, I had a colleague who's in her 80s who said she just sees the younger generation just handling this better, being more open and flexible than would have happened in her generation. And so my curiosity was about that. Like, do you think as we move forward, kind of the way that the younger generation is just having more flexibility, less, maybe I'm making assumptions, but some judge less, maybe it's the people I surround myself with, just looser in open and not getting as bogged down in things. Do you think that will sort of just naturally shift some of the reactivity in the system?
Exactly. I think what both of you have said is when you begin to know people who represent diversity or non-binary identifications, that you typically have an interest and an investment in them that usually may up the ante a bit for engaging with the difference without rejection or judgment in a negative way. I think societal emotional process around the country or around the world contributes to how families and groups respond to sexual diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there are places in the world where you can see progression related to societal emotional process, and then there's still places where you see regression.
Fair.
And so I think it is somewhat based on geographical regions of the world, what the belief systems are, what the political values are of a particular administration or another. But I think at the end of the day, back to Ann McKnight's comment about persistence, we're a stubborn group of people. You can't get rid of us, so you got to figure out how to live with us.
Yeah, there you go.
Maybe.
Well, I was thinking about that. You said your dinner table example, and I don't know, maybe I'll edit this out later, but I was thinking about I watched a lot of television growing up, like a lot of television, and you think about representation from when I was a kid watching TV in the 80s and Three's Company, that was Jack was gay, or pretending to be gay so he could live with those women, right? All the way up. I remember when Ellen came out on that one episode to today, and now I'll watch some of those clips with my kids, and they're like deeply offended by some of the things that are said in these TV shows and movies from the early 2000s. But I'm like, but that was like opening the door. That was just like, that was a way to show some diversity, and it was maybe awkwardly or poorly done or caricaturized. What's the word? A caricature?
Yeah, stereotypical.
Yeah.
But I guess it's just like, was that society practicing? Was that like the awkward dinner conversation of, we're actually going to talk about this, but we don't know how to do it?
Right.
Yeah.
I think Will and Grace, for example, gave a lot of families opportunities to engage in what's happening in their very own family with some grace, perhaps, and some humor and some love. that show was about relationships. It wasn't about sexuality.
Yeah.
Primarily.
Right.
I just think it just takes a long time. We know that evolutionarily. When I was doing my research, I was curious a lot about in baboon troops, for example, if there was same-sex activity and one member of the troop began to be identified as a individual who engaged a lot in same-sex activity and behavior, if that person would begin to be scapegoated or pushed to the bottom of the hierarchy. And by and large, that wasn't the case. Because I wanted to see how evident that was in other species who somehow would make some sort of dominance decision that same-sex wasn't acceptable and needed to be addressed in a way that didn't give it permission to be expressed. And I just didn't find evidence of that.
Yeah.
There was some, but not much.
Yeah. Which would represent variation, right? Again, like I think systems variation. Can I ask one more theory nerd question, and Kent can choose to pick it up or not? Is I do think I appreciate that this is extending the theory, and I just, for those who are listening who are theory nerds like myself, like I just would be interested in your thinking of what goes into just expanding on the original ideas, and how does that get just, I don't know the right word, just to become a part of the theory.
Well, I think Dr. Bowen laid the groundwork for all of it to happen by giving theory to the world, encouraging people to challenge it, to accept it, to modify it, to extend it, to be curious about where it worked and where it didn't, if that was the case. And I just have remained really connected to, I'm not challenging him or the theory. I'm being curious about ways of being that have persisted in all sorts of species over time. And I think I veered off from your last question, but what exactly did you ask?
Well, I guess in some ways I'm thinking, I'm pushing on it, that in some ways it is a challenge to some of the original writing about this. And I think, how does the theory move forward with a statement or an addition? I mean, I just think that is something that's worthy to think about in circles of Bowen nerds.
Yeah. Who has the authority to correct it? But there were the neo-Darwinists, there were the neo-Freudians. Fair. There can be the neo-Bowen folks. That doesn't take away from the thinking of the others that preceded them.
Oh, yeah.
No, I do think, whether it was Darwin or Bowen or Freud or Kent Webb, it takes courage to put your stake in the ground and your flag in the ground and work from it.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate your efforts.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, Dixie, I'm done.
I was gonna give my takeaway, but I don't need to go first. But I'll just go first. My takeaway was encouraging people to do some research about their own family. Sexual diversity is very likely present, and the question is it talked about? And I'm just always curious, what is the variation of response of different family members? I think it's really easy to say, this chunk of people will think like this, or this chunk of people will think like that. And each of those chunks of people is made up of individuals. And so can you hear the variation? Can you have conversations that invite hearing people's perspectives on diversity? So that was my takeaway.
Well, I think, it gets back to the one-to-one relationship that I think family research can highlight and emphasize. It's not, if one's really doing family of origin research and work towards differentiation, you're engaging with your family and with individuals within your family. So when I came out, I called all of my uncles and aunts and had personal conversations with them on the phone because I wanted to hear what they had to say and what their reaction was. And that really opened the door, I think, to clearing the way for me to continue to have open relationships with them. They were all viable, every one of them.
That's great. My takeaway is just going back to where I started, which is just I challenge everyone to go out there and observe their curiosity. Can you know in yourself when you've lost it? How do you get clearer in that? How can you just notice when you stay in that space of being open and curious and know when you've lost it? It's been a useful exercise for me. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think for people who really do the work, which means, engaging with your family and learning the theory and putting it into your life and all that stuff, which it just adds a lot of opportunity for growth and development.
Did you have anything else specific, Kent, for a takeaway for people or other resources?
Well, the Bowen Center and the Professionals series this last fall, following Joan Roughgarden's presence at the spring conference, then she had referenced Dr. Nathan Lentz as a particular person to continue looking at sexual diversity across species. And so Joe Berger is in charge of the professional series, identifying speakers, and he invited Nathan Lentz. October of 2025. Okay. Professional series would be another place if people want to listen to someone else speak about sexual diversity. He's an evolutionist and did work with Dr. Roughgarden, so that would be another resource.
Excellent. I'll find the link and put it in the show notes. Well, thank you for joining the conversation today, Kent. It was great to have you.
I really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to put what I think out there.
Thank you, Kent. I appreciate it as well. I am going to do my end of the series. If you want to support the efforts that go on to make this podcast happen and the behind the scenes efforts, please consider donating to our Ko-fi site. And we appreciate your support. And as always, if you'd like to learn more about Bowen theory or anything we said today sparked your interest, it is the time of year when most programs are doing some registration. So I want to direct you, Living Systems has opened its registration to our programs that start in September. And Kent Webb, who wears another hat where he is in charge of the Learning and Development Program at the Bowen Center in Washington, they also have their programs available, and they have different variations of programs that you can look at. So I'd encourage you to go to the Bowen Center site and check those out. And if you do join the postgraduate program, you will get to hear more from Kent and hear his thinking. So I would challenge you to go try that out. It's a very worthwhile program, and I appreciate Kent and the efforts you've made to really try and get that mix of in-person and online. I'm biased, but I do think there is some richness to having conversations in person. So I appreciate your efforts there.
Well, thank you. I also want to say, efforts like the two of you are making with this podcast to bring Bowen theory in a conversational way available to people. There are lots of ways to learn, and there are lots of doors to the theory. And I think you're just opening another one that's, in our 21st century world, it's a great one to open.
Thank you. I have one more, Dixie. Lastly, the international conference, which will happen in Vancouver in 2027, our abstracts are open. And so we would welcome those of you who want to share your thinking with a large audience about what you're working on in Bowen theory. There will be a link to that abstract. So I hope to either see many of you presenting or to put the the suggestion in your brain to come join us and meet us in person in July 2027 in Vancouver. So I'm done, Dixie. Thank you.
Okay. Well, and Kent, you have a music therapy degree. I was talking to someone the other day. I'm like, we got to get some music happening here because I'm a drummer and a singer, and we got to have some music at that conference. So,
well, I'm primarily a pianist, so
okay. Well,
We're
we can
close to a
pull in
band. It's
keyboard
coming together.
yeah. We have to find a singer and a guitarist, and
There you go.
Yeah,
the idea.
Avram Nadigal. Yeah, you better be there. So good. Well, I hope our listeners take away their own ideas to think about and research as you go out into your relationships. This podcast is produced by Living Systems, a nonprofit organization in Vancouver offering counseling and training programs in Bowen family systems theory across Canada.